Welcome, friends, fiends, family phantoms, Wapham crew, and new listeners. Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, November 13th, Monday, November 14th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I hope you guys have had an awesome, relaxing weekend so far. I hope you're staying cozy and warm. You're all snuggled up. You got your favorite cocktail or drink, cider perhaps, hot chocolate, something to cozy on up to, and get ready for story time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on one of our many outlets. If you're listening live right now, you may be listening to us at We Are Paradox Media, which you can find on Spreaker. And then you can also find us live on KPNL Radio, which you can find on KPNL Radio at kpnl-db.com. We are also on eTalk Radio live on Saturday nights, and you can find that at etalk.tv/radio. If you want to listen to us on your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, please follow us once again under We Are Paradox Media at Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser, and Podvine. If you prefer YouTube, you can find most of our episodes there under We Are Paradox Media. Please make sure that you subscribe, like any of the videos that you've listened to, and leave us a comment. Good, bad, ugly. I don't care. I just want to hear from you. Also, I want to know which future guests that you would like us to have on. So tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies, we are going to be reading from my 3 novels and 1 horror classics book. This is, we've already gotten through Dracula by Bram Stoker. We are currently on Frankenstein, and that's by Mary Shelley. The next book we'll be getting to is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But this evening, it is not Dracula. We already did that one. Frankenstein. It is such a lazy Sunday. In my jammies, in my hoodie. It's actually not too bad today. Well, I guess it's 48.7 degrees outside, 56.5 degrees in here. I put my AC/DC shirt on the floor to cover that hole that happened due to my husband was running a bath and the landlord showed up and he just left the bath water running and it overflowed and kind of caved in a piece of the floor. There was a mouse that used to run in and out of that hole, and it would scare the shit out of me because it would look like it's running right at me. But, as I said, I've been slaughtering the mices to pieces with these mouse traps. We only have 4. 1 went missing. Who knows what the hell happened to that? But yeah, we need to get some more because, I hate mices to pieces. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing. Well, let's get to our story, shall we? So we are on, holy shit, what is this? Is this chapter 20? I believe it is. I sat one evening in my laboratory. The sun had set, and the moon was just rising from the sea. I had not sufficient light for my employment, and I remained idle in a pause of consideration of whether I should leave my labor for the night or hasten its conclusion by an unremitting attention to it. As I sat, such a being I had created. I had been struck senseless by my fiendish threats, but now, for the first time, the wickedness of my promise burst upon me. I shuddered to think that future ages might curse me as their pest, whose selfishness had not hesitated to buy its own peace at the price, perhaps, of the existence of the whole human race. I trembled and my heart failed within me, when looking up, I saw, by the light of the moon, the daemon at the casement. A ghastly grin wrinkled his lips as he gazed on me, where I sat fulfilling the task which he had allotted to me. Yes, he had followed me in my travels. He had loitered in forests, hid himself in caves, or taken refuge in wide and desert heaths, and he now came to mark my progress and claim the fulfillment of my promise. As I looked on him, his countenance expressed the utmost extent of malice and treachery. I thought with a sensation of madness on my promise of creating another like to him, and trembling with passion tore to pieces the thing on which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge withdrew. I left the room, and locking the door, made a solemn vow in my own heart never to resume my labors, and then, with trembling steps, I sought my own apartment. I was alone. None were near me to dissipate the gloom and relieve me from the sickening oppression of the most terrible reveries. Several hours passed, and I remained near my window gazing on the sea. It was almost motionless, for the winds were hushed, and all nature reposed under the eye of the quiet moon. A few fishing vessels alone specked the water, and now and then the gentle breeze wafted the sound of voices, as the fishermen called to one another. I felt the silence, although I was hardly conscious of its extreme profundity, until my ear was suddenly arrested by the paddling of oars near the shore, and a person landed close to my house. In a few minutes after, I heard the creaking of my door, as if someone endeavored to open it softly. I trembled from head to foot. I felt a presentiment of who it was, and wished to rouse one of the peasants who dwelt in a cottage not far from mine, but I was overcome by the sensation of helplessness, so often felt in frightful dreams, when you in vain endeavor to fly from an impending danger. I have endured incalculable fatigue and cold and hunger. Do you dare destroy my hopes? Begone! I do break my promise. Never will I create another like yourself, equal in deformity and wickedness. Slave! I before reasoned with you, but you have proved yourself unworthy of my condescension. Remember that I have power. You believe yourself miserable, but I can make you so wretched that the light of day will be hateful to you. You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey. The hour of my irresolution is past, and the period of your power is arrived. Your threats cannot move me to do an act of wickedness, but they confirm me in a determination of not creating you a companion in vice. Shall I, in cold blood, set loose upon the earth a daemon, whose delight is in death and wretchedness? Begone! I am firm, and your words will only exasperate my age. My rage. The monster saw my determination in my face, and gnashed his teeth in impotence of anger. Shall each man, cried he, find a wife for his bosom, and each beast have his mate, and I be alone? I had feelings of affection, and they were requited by detestation and scorn. Man, you may hate, but beware. Your hours will pass in dread and misery, and soon the bolt will fall which must ravish from you your happiness forever. Are you to be happy, while I grovel in intensity of my wretchedness? You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains revenge. Henceforth, dearer than light or food, I may die, but you first, my tyrant and tormentor, shall curse the sun that gazes on your misery. Beware, for I am fearless and therefore powerful. I will watch with willingness of snake that I may sting with its venom. Man, you shall repent of your injuries, the injuries you inflict. Devils, cease, and do not poison the air with these sounds of malice. I have declared my resolution to you, and I am no coward to bend beneath words. Leave me, I am inexorable. It is well, I go, but remember, I shall be with you on your wedding night. I started forward and exclaimed, Villain, you sign my death warrant, be sure that you are yourself safe. I would have seized him, but he eluded me, and quitted the house with precipitation. In a few moments I saw him in his boat, which shot across the waters with an arrowy swiftness, and was soon lost amidst the waves. All was again silent, but his words rang in my ears, satisfying my appetite, which had become ravenous with an oaten cake. When I saw a fishing boat land close to me, and one of the men brought me a packet, it contained letters from Geneva, and one from Clairvaux entreating me to join him. He said that he was wearing away his time fruitlessly where he was, that letters from the friends he had formed in London desired his return to complete the negotiation they had entered into his Indian enterprise. He could not any longer delay his departure, but, as his journey to London might be followed, even sooner than he now conjectured, by his longer voyage, he entreated me to bestow as much of my society on him as I could spare. He besought me, therefore, to leave my solitary isle, and to meet him at Perth, and that we might proceed southwards together. This letter in a degree recalled me to life, and I determined to quit my island the expiration of 2 days. Yet before I departed there was a task to perform, on which I shuddered to reflect. I must pack up my chemical instruments, and for that purpose I must enter the room which had been the scene of my odious work, and must handle those utensils, the sight of which was sickening to me. The next morning, at daybreak, I summoned sufficient courage and unlocked the door of my laboratory. The remains of the half-finished creature who I had destroyed lay scattered on the floor, and I almost felt as if I had mangled the living flesh of a human being. I paused to collect myself, and then entered the chamber. With trembling hand I conveyed the instruments out of the room, but I reflected that I ought not to leave the relics of my work to excite the horror and suspicion of the peasants, and I accordingly put them into a basket, with a great quantity of stones, and laying them up, determined to throw them into the sea that very night. And in the meantime I sat upon the beach, employed in cleaning and arranging my chemical apparatus. Nothing could be more complete than the alteration that had taken place in my feelings since the night of the appearance of the daemon. I had before regarded my promise with a gloomy despair, as a thing that, with whatever consequences, must be fulfilled. But I now felt as if a film had been taken from before my eyes, and that I, for the first time, saw clearly. The idea of renewing my labors did not for one instant occur to me. The threat I had heard weighed on my thoughts, but I did not reflect that a voluntary act of mine could avert it. I had resolved in my own mind that to create another like the fiend I had first made would be an act of basest and most atrocious selfishness, and I banished from my mind every thought that could lead to a different conclusion. Between 2 and 3 in the morning the moon rose, and I then, putting my basket aboard a little skiff, sailed out about 4 miles from the shore. The scene was perfectly solitary. A few boats were returning towards land, but I sailed away from them. I felt as if I was about the commission of a dreadful crime, and avoided with shuddering anxiety any encounter with my fellow creatures. At one time the moon, which had before been clear, was suddenly overspread by a thick cloud, and I took advantage of the moment of darkness and cast my basket into the sea. I listened to the gurgling sound as it sunk, and then sailed away from the spot. The sky became clouded, but the air was pure, although chilled by the northeast breeze that was then rising. But it refreshed me and filled me with such agreeable sensations that I resolved to prolong my stay on the water, and fixing the rudder in a direct position, stretched myself at the bottom of the boat. Clouds hid the moon, everything was obscure, and I heard only the sound of the boat as its keel through the waves. The murmur lulled me, and in short time I slept soundly. I do not know how long I remained in this situation, but when I awoke I found that the sun had already mounted considerably. The wind was high, and the waves continually threatened the safety of my little skiff. I found that the wind was northeast, and must have driven me far from the coast from which I had embarked. I endeavored to change my course, but quickly found that if I again made the attempt, the boat would be instantly filled with water. Thus situated, my only resource was to drive before the wind. I confess that I felt a few sensations of terror. I had no compass with me, and was slenderly acquainted with the geography of this part of the world. That the sun was of little benefit to me. I might be driven into the wide Atlantic, and feel all the tortures of starvation, or be swallowed up in the immeasurable waters that roared before me. I had already been out many hours, and felt the torment of a burning thirst, a prelude to my other sufferings. I looked on the heavens, which were covered by clouds that flew before the wind, only to be replaced by others. I looked upon the sea. It was to be my grave. Fiend, I exclaimed, your task is already fulfilled. I thought of Elizabeth, of my father, and of Clairvoyant, all left behind, on whom the monster might satisfy his sanguinary and merciless passions. This idea plunged me into a reverie, so despairing and frightful, and even now, when the scene is on the point of closing before me forever, I shudder to reflect on it. Some hours passed thus, but by degrees, as the sun declined towards the horizon, the wind died away into a gentle breeze, and the sea became free from breakers. But these gave place to a heavy swell. I felt sick and hardly able to hold the rudder, when suddenly I saw a line of high land towards the south. Almost spent as I was by fatigue and the dreadful suspense I endured for hours, the sudden certainty of life rushed like a flood of warm joy to my heart, and tears gushed from my eyes. Hello, beautiful Sister Sandra. How mutable are our feelings, and how strange is that clinging love that we have of life, even in the excess of misery. I constructed another sail with a part of my dress, and eagerly steered my course towards the land. It had a wild and rocky appearance, but as I approached nearer, I was easily perceived the traces of cultivation. I saw vessels near the shore, and found myself suddenly transported back to the neighborhood of civilized men. I carefully traced the winds of the land, and hailed a steeple which I, at length, saw issuing from behind a small promontory. As I was in a state of extreme debility, I resolved to sail directly towards the town, as a place where I could most easily procure nourishment. Fortunately, I had money with me. As I turned the promontory, I perceived a small neat town and a good harbor, which I entered, my heart bounding with joy at my unexpected escape. As I was occupied in fixing the boat and arranging the sails, several people crowded towards the spot. They seemed much surprised at my appearance, but instead of offering me any assistance, whispered together with gestures that at any other time might have produced in me a slight sensation of alarm. As it was, I merely remarked that they spoke English, and I therefore addressed them in that language. "My good friends," said I, "will you be so kind as to tell me the name of this town, and inform me where I am?" "You will know that soon enough," replied a man with a hoarse voice. You are come to a place that will not prove much to your taste, but you will not be consulted as to your quarters, I promise you." I was exceedingly surprised on receiving so rude an answer from a stranger, and I was also disconcerted on perceiving the frowning and angry countenances of his companions. "Why do you answer me so roughly?" I replied. Surely it is not the custom of Englishmen to receive strangers so inhospitably. So, oh my gosh, inhospitably. I do not know, said the man, what the custom of English may be, but it is the custom of the Irish to hate villains. While this strange dialogue continued, I perceived the crowd rapidly increase. Their faces expressed a mixture of curiosity and anger which annoyed and in some degree alarmed me. I inquired the way to the inn, but no one replied. I then moved forward, and a murmuring sound arose from the crowd as they followed and surrounded me, when an ill-looking man approaching tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come, sir, you must follow me to Mr. Kirwan's to give an account of yourself." Who is Mr. Kirwan? Why am I to give an account of myself? Is not this a free country? Ay, sir, free enough for honest folks. Mr. Kirwan is a magistrate, and you are to give an account of the death of a gentleman who was found murdered here last night. This answer startled me, but I presently recovered myself. I was innocent, that could easily be proved. Accordingly, I followed my conductor in silence, and was led to one of the best houses in the town. I was ready to sink from fatigue and hunger, but being surrounded by a crowd, I thought it politic to rouse all my strength, that no physical debility might be construed into apprehension or conscious guilt. Little did I then expect the calamity that was in a few moments to overwhelm me, and extinguish in horror and despair all fear of ignominy of death. I must pause here, for it requires all my fortitude to recall the memory of the frightful events which I am about to relate in proper detail to my recollection. Chapter 21. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate, an old benevolent man with calm and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then, turning towards my conductors, asked who appeared as witnesses on this occasion. About half a dozen men came forward, and one being selected by the magistrate, he deposed that he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law Daniel Nugent, when about 10 o'clock they observed a strong northerly blast rising, and they accordingly put in for port. It was a very dark night, as the moon had not yet risen. They did not land at the harbor, but, as they had been accustomed, at a creek about 2 miles below. He walked on first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle, and his companions followed him at a short distance. As he was proceeding along the sands, he struck his foot against something, and fell at his length on the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and by the light of their lantern, they found that he had fallen on the body of a man, who was to all appearance dead. Their first supposition was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned, and was thrown on shore by the waves, but on examination they found that the clothes were not wet, and even that the body was not then cold. They instantly carried it to the cottage of an old woman near the spot, and endeavored, but in vain, to restore it to life. It appeared to be a handsome young man, about 25 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, for there was no sign of any violence except the black mark of fingers on his neck. The first part of his disposition did not in the least interest me, but when the mark of the fingers was mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother, and felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and a mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean on a chair for support. The magistrate observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavorable augury from my manner. The son confirmed his father's account, but when Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that just before the fall of his companion he saw a boat with a single man in it, at a short distance from the shore, and, as far as he could judge by the light of a few stars, it was the same boat in which I had just landed. A woman deposed that she lived near the beach and was standing at the door of her cottage, waiting for the return of the fishermen, about an hour before she heard the discovery of the body, when she saw a boat with only one man in it push off from the part of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the account of the fishermen having brought the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into a bed and rubbed it, and Daniel went to town for an apothecary, but life was quite gone. Several other men were examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that with the strong north wind that had risen during the night, it was very probable that I had beaten about for many hours, and had been obliged to return nearly to the same spot from which I had departed. Besides, they observed that it appeared that I had brought the body from another place, and it was likely that as I did not appear to know the shore, I might have put it into harbor, ignorant of the distance of town from the place where I had deposited the corpse. Mr. Kirwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken into the room where the body lay for interment, that I might be observed what effect the sight of it would produce upon me. This idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited when the mode of murder had been described. I was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the inn. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidences that had taken place during this eventful night, but, knowing that I had been conversing with several persons in the island I had inhabited about the time that the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair. I entered the room where the corpse lay, and was led up to the coffin. How can I describe my sensations of beholding it? I feel yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect in that terrible moment without shuddering in agony. The examination, the presence of the magistrate and witnesses, passed like a dream from my memory, when I saw the lifeless form of Henry Clerval stretched before me. I gasped for breath, and throwing myself on the body, I exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? 2 have I already destroyed. Other victims await their destiny, but you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor." The human frame could no longer support the agonies that I endured, and I was carried out of the room in strong convulsions. A fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months on the point of death. My ravings, as afterwards heard, were frightful. I called myself the murderer of William, of Justine, of Clerval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend by whom I was tormented, and at others I felt the fingers of the monster already grasping my neck, and screamed aloud with agony and terror. Fortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Kirwin alone understood me, but my gestures and bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Why did I not die? More miserable than man ever was before, why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? Death snatches away many blooming children, the only hopes of their doting parents. How many brides and youthful lovers have been one day in the bloom of health and hope, and the next a prey for worms and the decay of the tomb? Of what materials was I made, that I could thus resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of the wheel, continually renewed the torture? But I was doomed to live, and in 2 months found myself, as awakening from a dream, in a prison, stretched on a wretched bed, surrounded by gaolers, turnkey bolts, and all the miserable apparatus of a dungeon. It was morning, I remember, when I thus awoke to understanding. I had forgotten the particulars of what had happened, and only felt as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. But when I looked around, I saw the barred windows, and the squalidness of the room in which I was all flashed across my memory, and I groaned bitterly. This sound disturbed an old woman who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse and wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all those bad qualities which often characterize that class. The lines of her face were hard and rude, like that of a person accustomed to see without sympathizing in sights of misery. Her tone expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English, and the voice struck me as one that I had heard during my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" said she. I replied in the same language, with a feeble voice. "I believe I am, but if it all be true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." "For that matter," replied the old woman, "if you mean about the gentleman you murdered, I believe that it were better for you if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard for you. However, that's none of my business. I am sent to nurse you and get you well, and do my duty with a safe conscience. It were well if anybody did the same." I turned with loathing from the woman who could utter so unfeeling a speech to a person just saved, on the very edge of death, but I felt languid and unable to reflect on all that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me as a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it were all true, for it never presented itself to my mind with the force of reality. As the images that floated before me became more distinct, I grew feverish. A darkness pressed around me. No one was near me who soothed me with the great voice of love. No dear hand supported me. The physician came and prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter carelessness was visible in the first, and the expression of brutality was strongly marked in the visage of the second. Who could be interested in the fate of a murderer but the hangman who would gain his fee? These were my first reflections, but I soon learned that Mr. Kirwin had shown me extreme kindness. He had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Wretched, indeed, was the best. And it was he who had provided a physician and a nurse. It is true he seldom came to see me, for although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to be present at the agonies of the miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short and with intervals. Long intervals. One day I was gradually recovering. I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open, and my cheeks livid like those in death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected I had better seek death than desire to remain in a world which, to me, was replete with wretchedness. At one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty and suffer the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were the thoughts when the door of my apartment was opened and Mr. Kirwin entered. His countenance expressed sympathy and compassion. He drew a chair close to mine and addressed me in French. "I fear that this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything to make you more comfortable?" "I thank you, but all that you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth there is no comfort which I am capable of receiving. I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but a little relief to one down as you are by so strange a misfortune. But you will, I hope, soon quit this melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can easily be brought to free you from the criminal charge." "That is my least concern. I am, by a course of strange events, become the most miserable of mortals. Persecuted and tortured as I am and have been, can death be any evil to me? Nothing indeed could be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown by some surprising accident on this shore, renowned for its hospitality, seized immediately, and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eyes was the body of a friend murdered in so unaccountable a manner, and placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path." As Mr. Kirwin said this, notwithstanding the agitation I endured on this retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprise at the knowledge he seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose some astonishment was exhibited in my countenance, for Mr. Kerwin hastened to say, "Immediately upon your being taken ill, all the papers that were in your person were brought to me, and I examined them that I might discover some trace of by which I could send you to your relations an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and among others one which I discovered from its commencement to be your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter, but you are ill. Even now you tremble. You are unfit for agitation of any kind. This suspense is 1,000 times worse than the most horrible event. Tell me what new scene of death has been acted, and whose I am now lament. Your family is perfectly well, said Mr. Kerwin with gentleness, and someone, a friend, is come to visit you. I know not by what chain of thought the idea presented itself, but it instantly darted into my mind that the murderer had come to mock at my misery and taunt me with the death of Clairvaux, as a new incitement for me to comply with his hellish desires. I put my hand before my eyes and cried out in agony, "Oh, take him away! I cannot see him, for God's sake! Do not let him enter!" Mr. Kerwin regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamation as a presumption of my guilt, and said, in rather a severe tone, "I should have thought, young man, that the presence of your father would have been welcome instead of inspiring such violent repugnance." "My father?" cried I, while every feature and every muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure. "Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind! But where is he? Why does he not hasten me?" My change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrate. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was a momentary return to delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, and in a moment my father entered it. Nothing at this moment could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. I stretched out my hand to him and cried, "Are you then safe, and Elizabeth, and Ernest?" My father calmed me with assurances of their welfare, and endeavored my dwelling on these subjects so interesting to heart, to raise my desponding spirits, but he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness. What a place is this that you inhabit, my son?" said he, looking mournfully at the barred windows and wretched appearance of the room. "You travel to seek happiness, but a fatality seems to pursue you and poor Clairvaux." The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured in my weak state. I shed tears. "Alas, yes, my father," replied I, "some destiny of the most horrible kind hangs over me, and I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died on the coffin of Henry." We were now allowed to converse for any length of time, for the precarious state of my health rendered every precaution necessary that could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kerwin came in and insisted that my strength should not be exhausted by too much exertion. But the appearance of my father was to me like that of a good angel, and I gradually recovered my health. As my sickness quitted, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. The image of Clairvaux was for ever before me, ghastly and murdered. More than once, the agitation in which these reflections threw me made my friends dread a dangerous relapse. Alas, why did they preserve so miserable and detested a life? It was surely that I might fill my destiny, which now drawing to a close, soon, oh, very soon, will death extinguish these throbbings and relieve me from the mighty wind of anguish that bears me to the dust, and, in executing the award of justice, I shall also sink to rest. Then the appearance of death was distant, although the wish was ever present to my thoughts, and I often sat for hours motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me and my destroyer in its ruins. The season of the assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak and in continual danger of a relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles to the county town where the court was held. Mr. Kerwin charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranging my defense. I was spared the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, as the case was not brought before the court that decides on life and death. The grand jury rejected the bill on its being proved that I was on the Orkney Islands at the hour the body of my friend was found. In a fortnight after my removal, I was liberated from prison. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of a criminal charge, that I was again allowed to breathe the fresh atmosphere, and permitted to return to my native country. I did not participate in these feelings, for to me the walls of the dungeon or place were alike hateful. The cup of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me, as upon the happy and gay heart, I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness, portrayed by no light but the glimmer of two eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes they were the expressive eyes of Henry, languishing in death, the dark orbs nearly covered by the lids, and the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery, clouded eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in my chamber in Ingolstadt. My father tried to awaken in me the feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth and Ernest, but these words only drew deep groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish for happiness, and thought with melancholy delight of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring maladie du pays to see once more the blue lake and rapid Rhone, and had been so dear to me in my early childhood. But my general state of feeling was a torpor, in which a prison was as welcome a residence as the divinest scene in nature, and these fits were seldom interrupted but by paroxysm of anguish and despair. At these moments I often endured to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing attendance and vigilance to restrain me from committing some dreadful act of violence. Yet one duty remained to me, the recollection of which finally triumphed over my selfish despair. It was necessary that I should return without delay to Geneva, there to watch over the lives of those I so fondly loved, and to lie in wait for the murderer, that if any chance led me to the place of his concealment, or if he dared again to blast me by his presence, I might with unfailing aim put an end to the existence of the monstrous image which I had endured with the mockery of a soul still more monstrous. My father still desired to delay our departure, fearful that I could not sustain the fatigues of a journey, for I was a shattered wreck, the shadow of a man, of a human being. My strength was gone, I was a mere skeleton, and fever night and day preyed upon my wasted frame. Still, as I urged our leaving Ireland with such inquietude and impatience, my father thought it best to yield. He took our passage on board a vessel bound for Havre de Grace, and sailed with a fair wind from the Irish shores. It was midnight. I lay on the deck, looking at the stars and listening to the dashing of the waves. I held the darkness that shut Ireland from my sight, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy when I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. The past appeared to me in the light of the frightful dream, yet the vessel in which I was, the wind that blew me from the detested shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, told me forcibly that I was deceived by no vision, and that Clerval, my friend and dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and my departure for Ingolstadt. I remembered shuddering the mad enthusiasm that hurried me on to the creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the night in which he first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thought. A thousand feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. Ever since my recovery from the fever, I had been in the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum, for it was by means of this drug only that I was able to gain the rest necessary for the preservation of life. Oppressed by the recollection of my various misfortunes, I now swallowed double by usual quantity, and soon slept profoundly. But sleep did not afford me respite from the thought and misery. My dreams presented 1,000 objects and scared me. Towards morning I was possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend's grasp on my neck, and I could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rang in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceiving my restlessness, awoke me. The dashing of waves were around, in the cloudy sky above. The fiend was not here. A sense of security, a feeling that a truce was established between the present hour and the irresistible, disastrous future, impaired to me a kind of calm forgetfulness of which the human mind is by its structure peculiarly susceptible. On that note, boys and girls, we are going to go to our first music break. On this break, we have Miss Mia Savage with her band, Antidote for Savages. She'll be singing Your Skeleton, Our New Reality, Let Me Be Your Home, as well as Lemurian Crypto. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So glad you could join us for story time with me, TessaTNT. I hope you've enjoyed Frankenstein so far, or Frankenstein. It's been pretty interesting. I've been enjoying it, I must say. Talking to the bank lady about books the other day when they had to reprint my card because the hacker got a hold of that shit, but yeah, now I got a lot of work ahead of me to reboot my card number to like my website and certain things like that, so I don't miss out on the epic price I got 12 years ago because they're really expensive now. All right, so we're on chapter 22 of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The voyage came to an end. We landed and proceeded to Paris. I soon found that I had overtaxed my strength and that I must repose before I could continue my journey. My father's care and attentions were indefatigable, but he did not know the origin of my sufferings, and sought erroneous methods to remedy the incurable ill. He wished me to seek amusement in society, and abhorred the face of man. Oh, not abhorred. They were my brethren, my fellow beings, and I felt attracted even to the most repulsive among them, as to creatures of an angelic nature and celestial mechanism. But I felt that I had a frog in my throat. Excuse me. But I felt that I had no right to share their intercourse. I had unchained an enemy among them whose joy it was to shed their blood and to revel in their groans. How they would, each and all, abhor me and hunt me from the world. Did they know my unhallowed acts and the crimes which had their source in me? My father yielded at length to my desire to avoid society, and strove by various arguments to banish my despair. Sometimes he thought that I felt deeply in degradation of being obliged to answer a charge of murder, and he endeavored to prove to me the futility of pride. Alas, my father, said I, how little do you know me. Human beings, their feelings and passions, would indeed be degraded if such a wretch as I felt pride. Justine, poor unhappy Justine, was as innocent as I, and she suffered the same charge. She died for it, and I am the cause of this. I murdered her. William, Justine, and Henry, they all died by my hands. My father had often, during my imprisonment, heard me make the same assertion. When I thus accused myself, he sometimes seemed to desire an explanation, and at others he appeared to consider it as the offspring of delirium, and that, during my illness, some idea of this kind had presented itself to my imagination, the remembrance of which I preserved in my convalescence. I avoided explanation and maintained a continual silence concerning the wretch I had created. I had a persuasion that I should be supposed mad, and this in itself would forever have changed my tongue, but, besides, I could not bring myself to disclose a secret which would fill my hearer with consternation and make fear and unnatural horror inmates of his breast. I checked, therefore, my impatient thirst for sympathy, and was silent. I would have given the world to have confided the fatal secret. Yet, still words like those have recorded would burst uncontrollably from me. I could offer no explanation of them, but their truth in part relieved the burden of my mysterious woe. Upon this occasion my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder, "My dearest Victor, what infatuation is this? My dear son, I entreat you never make such an assertion again." Upon this occasion my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder, "I am not mad," I cried, energetically. "The sun and the heavens, who have viewed my operations, can bear witness to my truth. I am the assassin of those whose innocent victims they died by my machinations. 1,000 times would I have shed my own blood drop by drop to save their lives, but I could not, my father, indeed I could not sacrifice the whole human race." The conclusion of this speech convinced my father that my ideas were deranged, and he instantly changed the subject of our conversation, and endeavored to alter the course of my thoughts. He wished as much as possible to obliterate the memory of the scene that had taken place in Ireland, and never alluded to them or suffered me to speak my misfortunes. As time passed away, I became more calm. Misery had her dwelling in my heart, but no longer talked in the same incoherent manner of my own crimes. Sufficient for me was the consciousness of them, but the utmost self-violence curbed the imperious voice of wretchedness, which sometimes desired to declare itself to the whole world, and my manners were calmer and more composed than they had ever been since my journey of the sea of ice. A few days before we left Paris on our way to Switzerland, I received the following letter from Elizabeth. My dear friend, it gave me the greatest pleasure to receive a letter from my uncle dated at Paris. You are no longer at a formidable distance, and I may hope to see you in less than a fortnight. My poor cousin, how much you must have suffered! I expect to see you looking even more ill than when you quitted Geneva. This winter has been passed more miserably. Tortured as I have been by anxious suspense, yet I hope to see peace in your countenance, and to find that your heart is not totally void of comfort and tranquillity. Yet I fear that the same feelings now exist that made you so miserable a year ago, even perhaps augmented by time. I would not disturb you at this period when so many misfortunes weigh upon you, but a conversation that I had with my uncle previous to his departure renders some explanation necessary before we meet. Explanation. You may possibly say, what can Elizabeth have to explain? If you really say this, my questions are answered, and all my doubts satisfied. But you are distant from me, and it is possible that you may dread and yet be pleased with this explanation. And in a probability of this being the case, I dare not any longer postpone writing what, during your absence, I have often wished to express to you, but have never had the courage to begin. You well know, Victor, that our union had been the favorite plan of your parents ever since our infancy. We were told this when young and taught to look forward to it as an event that would certainly take place. We were affectionate playfellows during childhood and, I believe, dear and valued friends to one another as we grew older. But as brother and sister often entertain a lively affection towards each other without desiring a more intimate union, may not such also be our case? Tell me, dearest Victor, answer me, I conjure you, by our mutual happiness with simple truth, do you not love another? You have travelled. You have spent several years of your life in Ingolstadt, and I confess to you, my friend, that when I saw you last autumn so unhappy, flying to solitude from society of every creature, I could not help supposing that you might regret our connection, and believe yourself found in honour to fulfil the wishes of your parents, although they opposed themselves to your inclinations. But this is false reasoning. I confess to you, my friend, that I love you, and that in my airy dreams of futurity you have been my constant friend and companion. But it is your happiness I desire as well as my own. When I declare to you that our marriage would render me eternally miserable unless it were to dictate of your own free choice, even now I weep to think that, borne down as you are the cruelest misfortunes, you may stifle, by the word honour, all hope that love and happiness which would alone restore you to yourself. I, who have so disinterested an affection for you, may increase your miseries tenfold by being an obstacle to your wishes. Ah, Victor, be assured that your cousin and playmate has too sincere a love for you not to be made miserable by this supposition. Be happy, my friend, and if you obey me in this one request, remain satisfied that nothing on earth will have the power to interrupt my tranquillity. Do not let this letter disturb you. Do not answer tomorrow or the next day, or even until you come, if it will give you pain. My uncle will send me news of your health, and if I see but one smile on your lips when we meet, occasioned by this or any other exertion of mine, I shall need no other happiness. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, May 18th, 17 something. Doesn't say, it just says 17 dash. This letter revived in my memory what I had before forgotten, the threat of the fiend. I will be with you on your wedding night. Such was my sentence, and on that night would the demon employ every art to destroy me, and tear me from the glimpse of happiness, which promised partly to console my sufferings. On that night he had determined to consummate his crimes by my death. Will, be it so, a deadly struggle would then assuredly take place, in which he were victorious, I should be at peace, and his power over me be at an end. If he were vanquished, I should be a free man. Alas, what freedom! Such as the peasant enjoys when his family have been massacred before his eyes, his cottage burnt, his lands laid to waste, and he is the turn to be turned adrift, homeless, penniless, and alone, but free. Such would be the liberty, except that in Elizabeth I possessed a treasure. Alas, by those horrors of remorse and guilt, which would pursue me until death. Sweet and beloved Elizabeth, I read and reread her letter, and some softened feelings stole into my heart and dared to whisper paradisiacal dreams of love and joy. But the apple was already eaten, and the angel's arm barred to drive me from all hope. Yet I would die to make her happy. If the monster executed his threat, death was inevitable, yet again I considered whether my marriage would hasten my fate. My destruction might indeed arrive a few months sooner, but if my torturer should suspect that I postponed it, influenced by his menaces, he would in the meantime he would surely find another and perhaps more dreadful means of revenge. He had vowed to be with me on my wedding night, yet he did not consider that the threat of binding him to peace in the meantime, for as if to show me that he was not yet satiated with blood, he had murdered Clairvoyant immediately after the enunciation of his threats. I resolved, therefore, that if my immediate union with my cousin would conduce either to hers or my father's happiness, my adversary's designs against my life should not retard it a single hour. In this state of mind, I wrote to Elizabeth. My letter was calm and affectionate. I fear, my beloved girl, I said, little happiness remains for us on earth, yet all that I may one day enjoy is centered in you. Chase away your idle fears. To you alone do I consecrate my life and my endeavors of contentment. I have one secret, Elizabeth, a dreadful one. When revealed to you, it will chill your frame with horror, and then, far from being surprised at my misery, you will only wonder that I survive what I have endured. I will confide this tale of misery and terror to you the day after our marriage shall take place, for, my sweet cousin, there must be perfect confidence between us. But until then, I conjure you, do not mention or allude to it. This I most earnestly entreat, and I know you will comply. In about a week after the arrival of Elizabeth's letter, we returned to Geneva. The sweet girl welcomed me with warm affection, yet tears were in her eyes as she beheld my emaciated frame and feverish cheeks. I saw a change in her also. She was thinner and had lost most of that heavenly vivacity that had before charmed me, but her gentleness and soft looks of compassion made her a more fit companion for one blasted and miserable as I was. The tranquillity which I now enjoyed did not endure. Memory brought madness with it, and when I thought of what had passed, a real insanity possessed me. Sometimes I was furious and burnt with rage, sometimes low and despondent. I neither spoke nor looked at anyone, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Her gentle voice would soothe me when transported by passion, and inspire me with human feeling when sunk in torpor. She wept with me and for me. When reason returned, she would remonstrate and endeavor to inspire me with resignation. It is well for the fortunate to be resigned, but for the guilty there is no peace. The agonies of remorse poison the luxury there is otherwise sometimes found in the indulging the excess of grief. Soon after my arrival, my father spoke of my immediate marriage with Elizabeth. I remained silent. Have you then some other attachment? None on earth. I love Elizabeth, and look forward to our union with delight. Let the day therefore be fixed, and on it I will consecrate myself, in life or death, to the happiness of my cousin. My dear Victor, do not speak thus. Heavy misfortunes have befallen us, but let us only cling closer to what remains, and transfer our love for those whom we have lost to those who yet live. Our circle will be small, but bound close by the ties of affection and mutual misfortune. And when time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects of care will be born to replace those of whom we have been so cruelly deprived. Such were the lessons of my father, but to me the remembrance of the threat returned. Nor can you wonder that, omnipotent as the fiend had yet been in his deeds of blood, I should almost regard him as invincible, and that when he had pronounced the words, "I shall be with you on your wedding night," I should regard the threatened fate as unavoidable. But death was no evil to me, if the loss of Elizabeth were balanced with it, and I therefore, with a contented and even cheerful countenance, agreed with my father that if my cousin would consent, the ceremony should take place in 10 days, and thus put, as I imagine, the seal to my fate. Great God! If for one instant I had thought what might be the hellish intention of my fiendish adversary, I would rather have banished myself for ever from my native country, and wandered a friendless outcast over the earth, than have consented to this miserable marriage. But if I possessed of magic powers, the monster had blinded me to his real intentions, and when I thought that I had prepared only my own death, I hastened that of a far dearer victim. As the period fixed for our marriage drew nearer, whether from cowardice or prophetic feeling, I felt my heart sink within me. But I concealed my feelings by an appearance of hilarity that brought smiles and joy to the countenance of my father, but hardly deceived the ever-watchful and nicer eye of Elizabeth. She looked forward to our union in placid contentment, not unmingled with a little fear which past misfortunes had impressed, and what now appeared certain and tangible happiness might soon dissipate in an airy dream and leave no trace but deep and everlasting regret. Preparations were made for the event, congratulatory visits were received, and all wore a smiling appearance. I shut up, as well as I could, in my own heart the anxiety that preyed there, and entered with seeming earnestness into the plans of my father, although they might only serve as the decorations of my tragedy. Through my father's exertions, a part of the inheritance of Elizabeth had been restored to her by the Austrian government. A small possession on the shores of Como belonged to her. It was agreed that immediately after our union we should proceed to Villa Lavenza, and spend our first days of happiness beside the beautiful lake near which it stood. In the meantime, I took every precaution to defend my person in case the fiend should openly attack me. I carried pistols and a dagger constantly about me, and was ever on the watch to prevent artifice, and by these means gained a greater degree of tranquillity. Indeed, as the period approached, the threat appeared more as a delusion, not to be regarded as worthy to disturb my peace, while the happiness I hoped for in my marriage wore a greater appearance of certainty. As the day fixed for its solemnization drew nearer, and I heard it continually spoken of as an occurrence which no accident could possibly prevent. Elizabeth seemed happy. My tranquil demeanor contributed greatly to calm her mind. But on the day that was to fulfill my wishes and my destiny, she was melancholy, and a presentiment of evil pervaded her, and perhaps also she thought of the dreadful secret which I had promised to reveal to her on the following day. My father was in the main time overjoyed, and in the bustle of preparation only recognized in the melancholy of his niece the defiance of a bride. After the ceremony was performed, a large party assembled at my father's, but it was agreed that Elizabeth and I should commence our journey by water, sleeping that night at Evian, and continuing our voyage on the following day. The day was fair and the wind favorable. All smiled on our nuptial embarkation. Those were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feeling of happiness. We passed rapidly along. The sun was hot, but we were sheltered from its rays by a kind of canopy. While we enjoyed the beauty of the scene, sometimes on one side of the lake, where we saw Mont Saleve, the pleasant banks of Montalegre, and, at a distance, surmounting all, the beautiful Mont Blanc, and the assemblage of snowy mountains that in vain endeavored to emulate her, sometimes coasting the opposite banks. We saw the mighty Jura opposing its dark side to the ambition that would quit its native country, and an almost insurmountable barrier to the invader who should wish to enslave it. I took the hand of Elizabeth. You are sorrowful, my love. Ah, if you knew what I have suffered, and what I may yet endure, you would endeavor to let me taste the quiet and freedom from despair that this one day at least permits me to enjoy. Be happy, my dear Victor, replied Elizabeth. There is, I hope, nothing to distress you. And be assured that if a lively joy is not painted in my face, my heart is contented. Something whispers to me not to depend too much on the prospect that is opened before us, but I will not listen to such a sinister voice. Observe how fast we move along, and how the clouds, which sometimes obscure and sometimes rise above the dome of Mont Blanc, render this scene of beauty still more interesting. Look also at the innumerable fish that are swimming in the clear waters, where we can distinguish every pebble that lies at the bottom. What a divine day! How happy and serene all nature appears! Thus Elizabeth endeavored to divert her thoughts and mine from all reflection upon melancholy subjects. But her temper was fluctuating. Joy for a few instances shone in her eyes, but it continually gave place to distraction and reverie. The sun sank lower in the heavens. We passed the river Drance and observed its path through the chasms of the higher and the glens of the lower hills. The Alps here come closer to the lake, and we approached the amphitheatre of mountains which forms its eastern boundary. The spire of Evian shone under the woods that surrounded it, and the range of mountain above mountain by which it was overhung. The wind, which had hitherto carried us along with amazing rapidity, sunk at the sunset to the light breeze. The soft air just ruffled the water, and caused a pleasant motion among the trees as we approached the shore, from which it wafted the most delightful scent of flowers and hay. The sun sunk beneath the horizon as we landed, and as I touched the shore, I felt those cares and fears revive, which were to clasp me and cling to me forever. Chapter 23. It was 8 o'clock when we landed. We walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitory light, and then retired to the inn, and contemplated the lovely scene of waters, woods, and mountains obscured in darkness, yet still displaying their black outlines. The wind, which had fallen in the south, now rose with great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the vulture and dimmed her rays, while the lake reflected the scene of the busy heavens, rendered still busier by the restless waves that were beginning to rise. Suddenly a heavy storm of rain descended. I had been calm during the day, but so soon as night obscured the shapes of objects, a thousand fears arose in my mind. I was anxious and watchful, while right hand grasped a pistol which was hidden in my bosom. Every sound terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly and not shrink from the conflict until my own life, or that of my adversary, was distinguished. Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time in timid, fearful silence, but there was something in my glance that communicated terror to her, and trembling she asked, "What is it that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is it you fear?" "Oh, peace, peace, my love," replied I. "This night and all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, very dreadful." I passed an hour in this state of mind when suddenly I reflected how fearful the combat which I momentarily expected would be to my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I had obtained some knowledge as to the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passages of the house, and inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat to my adversary. But I discovered no trace of him, and was beginning to conjecture that some fortunate chance had intervened to prevent the execution of his menaces, when suddenly I heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room into which Elizabeth had retired. As I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind. My arms dropped, the motion of my muscle and fibre was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling in my veins, and tingling in the extremities of my limbs. This state lasted out but for an instant. The scream was repeated, and I rushed into the room. Great God! Why did I not then expire? Why am I here to relate the destruction of the best hope and purest creature of earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down, and her pale and distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form flung by the murderer on its bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas, life is obstinate and clings closest where it is most hated. For a moment only did I lose recollection. I fell senseless on the ground. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenances expressed a breathless terror, but the horror of others appeared only as a mockery. A shadow of the feelings that oppressed me, I escaped from them to the room where lay the body of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy. She had been moved from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now, as she lay, her head upon her arm, and the handkerchief thrown across her face and neck, I might have supposed her asleep. I rushed towards her and embraced her with ardor, but the deadly languor and coldness of the limbs told me that what I now beheld in my arms had ceased to be Elizabeth, whom I had loved and cherished. The murderous mark of the fiend's grasp was on her neck, and the breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her in agony of despair, I happened to look up. The windows of the room had before been darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the pale yellow light of the moon illuminate the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back, and with a sensation of horror not to be described, I saw at the open window a figure the most hideous and abhorred. A grin was on his face. It was on the face of the monster. He seemed to jeer, as with his fiendish finger he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed towards the window, and drawing a pistol from my bosom, fired, but he eluded me, leaped from his station, and running with the swiftness of lightning, plunged into the lake. The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spot where he disappeared, and we followed the track with boats. Nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless. Most of my companions believed it to have been a form conjured up by my fancy. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I attempted to accompany them, and proceeded a short distance from the house, but my head whirled round, my steps were like those of a drunken man. I fell at last in a state of utter exhaustion. A film covered my eyes, and my skin was parched with the heat of fever. In this state I was carried back and placed on a bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered round the room as if to seek something that I had lost. After an interval I arose, and, as if by instinct, crawled into the room where the corpse of my beloved lay. There were women weeping around. I hung over it, and joined my sad tears to theirs. All this time no distinct idea presented itself to my mind, but my thoughts rambled to various subjects, reflecting confusedly on my misfortunes and their cause. I was bewildered, in a cloud of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Clairvoyant, and lastly, of my wife. Even at that moment, I knew not that my only remaining friends were safe from the malignity of my fiend. My father, even now, might be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. This idea made me shudder and recalled me to action. I started up and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed. There were no horses to be procured, and I must return by lake, but the wind was unfavorable and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from mental torment in bodily exercise. But the overflowing misery I now felt, and the excess of agitation that I endured, rendering me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar, and leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. If I looked up, I saw scenes which were familiar to me in my happier time, and which I had contemplated but the day before in the company of her who was now but a shadow and a recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes. The rain had ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the waters, as they had done a few hours before. They had then been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine, or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was, so frightful an event is single in the history of man. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed this last overwhelming event? Mine has been a tale of horrors. I have reached their acme, and what I must now relate can but be tedious to you. Know that, one by one, my friends were snatched away. I was left desolate. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell in a few words what remains of my hideous narration. I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I see him now, excellent and vulnerable old man. His eyes wandered in vacancy, for they had lost their charm and their delight. His Elizabeth, his more than daughter, whom he doted on with all that affection which a man feels, who in the decline of life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to those that remained. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery on his grey hairs, and doomed him to waste and wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. The springs of existence suddenly gave way. He was unable to rise from his bed, and in a few days he died in my arms. What then became of me, I know not. I lost sensation, and chains and darkness were the only objects that pressed upon me. Sometimes, indeed, I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows and pleasant vales with the friends of my youth. But I awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clear conception of my miseries and situation, and was then released from my prison. For they had called me mad, and during many months, as I understood, a solitary cell had been my habitation. Liberty, however, had been an useless gift to me, and had I not, as I awakened to reason, at the time awakened to revenge. As the memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause, the monster whom I had created, the miserable demon whom I had sent abroad into the world for my destruction. I was possessed by the mandering rage when I thought of him, and desired and ardently prayed that I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on his cursed head. Nor did my hate long confine itself to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in town and told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew the destroyer of my family, and that I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of the murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. "Be assured, sir," said he, "no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain." "I thank you," replied I. "Listen, therefore, to the disposition that I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange, that I should fear you would not credit it were there not something in truth which, however wonderful, forces conviction. The story is too connected to be mistaken for a dream, and I have no motive for falsehood. My manner as I thus addressed him was impressive but calm. I had formed in my own heart a resolution to pursue my destroyer to death, and this purpose quieted my agony and for an interval concealed me to life. I now related my history briefly, but the firmness and precision marking the dates with accuracy and never deviating into inventive or exclamation. The magistrate appeared at first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror. At others a lively surprise, unmingled with disbelief, was painted on his countenance. When I had concluded my narration, I said, "This is the being whom I accuse, and for whose seizure and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as a magistrate, and I believe and hope that your feelings as a man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion." This address caused a considerable change in physiognomy of my own auditor. He had heard my story with that half kind of belief that is given to a tale of spirits and supernatural events, but when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, "I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit, but the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers which would put all my exertions to defiance. Who can follow an animal which can traverse a sea of ice, and inhabit caves and dens where no man would venture to intrude? Besides, some months have elapsed since the commission of his crimes, and no one can conjecture to what place he has wandered, or what region he may now inhabit. I do not doubt that he hovers near the spot which I inhabit, and if he is indeed taking refuge in the Alps, he may be hunted like the chamois, and destroyed as a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. You do not credit my narrative, and do not intend to pursue my enemy with the punishment which is his desert." As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrate was intimidated. "You are mistaken," he said. "I will exert myself, and if it is in my power to seize the monster, be assured that he shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crimes. But I fear from what you have yourself described to be his properties, that this will prove impracticable, and thus, while every proper measure is pursued, you should make up your mind to disappointment." "That cannot be, but all that I can say will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you, yet, while I allow it to be a vice, I confess that it is devouring and only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable when I reflect that the murderer, whom I have turned loose upon society, still exists. You refuse my just demand. I have but one resource, and I devoted myself, either in my life or death, to his destruction." I trembled with excess of agitation as I said this. There was a frenzy in my manner, and something, I doubt not, of the haughty fierceness which the martyrs of old are said to have possessed. But to a Genevan magistrate, whose mind was occupied by far other ideas than those of devotion and heroism, this elevation of mind had much the appearance of madness. He endeavored to soothe me as a nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effects of delirium. "Man," I cried, "how ignorant art thou in thy pride of wisdom! Cease, you know not what it is you say." I broke from the house angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action. On that note, boys and girls, we are going to move on to our second music break. On this break, we have Miss Mia Savage with Bury Me in Heaven, Singing to Your Grave, The Bottom Line, and Not a Phase. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this music break. Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us this evening on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So, for the past couple hours, we have been reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I am actually really tempted to keep reading it, but we'll wait till next Sunday to do that. We're almost done with it. There's like, I think a chapter, maybe two left. And then we're moving on to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So that's going to be awesome. As per regular, we are going to go to Reddit and read some ghost stories. Last night we actually read High Strangeness on Reddit. Different articles there, but yeah, I'm ready to bust out some ghost stories here. So this one is by you/serious brain issues. Nearly crashed my car. Ghosts or mental illness. Help. I just want to know if this is a mental illness or real paranormal activity. So recently, I was driving down the road, probably around 11 p.m., with my daughter in her car seat, and she's under 2 years old, to pick up her mother from work. While driving down the road with music playing and one window down, I'm always glancing in my windows and mirrors just to be aware of the road and everything around me. Regularly checking my windows and mirrors, I glanced twice at my rearview mirror, and the second time what I saw almost made me swerve off of the road into a tree. I looked in the mirror and saw a ghostly woman with long black hair, fair skin, and dark eyes, looking down at my baby in the child seat, and then her one eye, side face, towards me, hair covering half of her face, looking right at me in the mirror. After almost swerving off the road, I regained control of my car and looked straight ahead and told myself inside my head, "Don't freak out. Don't freak out. Don't look yet. Don't look." After a couple of seconds, I glanced in the mirror again because my child's back there and she's gone. I instantly look back ahead and I'm scared but glad she was not there. Then instantly I turned around and feel around my back seat flooring to make sure it's not a real person hiding behind the back seats. There was nothing there, and I returned to driving to pick up my wife at her job. But surprisingly, this is not the only thing that's been happening lately. There are even incidents my wife has been having around our house now, too. Doors moving slightly, roof ladder hatch slamming randomly, even after I checked how heavy the latch was to make sure it couldn't be wind, then screwed it straight into the wood so it technically cannot move even if it was wind. What makes me question if it's a mental illness is the fact a year ago, while I was driving down the road morning time around 8 a.m., it sounds like a woman in my back seat had just yelled into my ear while I was driving down the road, almost causing me to swerve into the oncoming traffic lane. But after regaining control, I instantly grabbed the volume knob to turn it down in case it was my speakers, but my volume was not even at 10. Instantly, I realized it wasn't my music, and look around the car to see if there was someone else outside, and there were barely any cars around. Instantly, I'm on edge, and now paranoid while driving to work and worrying if I was just going crazy. The strange face outside the window. This is by U/major_war 2407. This is a story I've wanted to tell for a long time. My family has two people, me and my mother. My mother is a teacher. She teaches literature in high school. I was still a middle school student at the time. Usually, after a stressful day, my mother would go out with her friends. At about 2 a.m., she came home, reeking of beer. On the occasion of her wearing nice clothes, she wanted me to take pictures of her. The front of my house is mostly a large glass door with iron bars crossed to make the frame. She modeled in front of the door. After a while, I reviewed what had just taken. Everything seemed so normal, until one picture that I noticed something strange. There was a white streak behind the glass door next to my mother's face. I tried to take a closer look. Unmistakable, it's a face. A white face with two black eyes looking straight into the camera in a creepy way. So black that it seems to be just an eye socket and a toothless wide mouth. Everything seems to be twisted into the center of the face. I have a feeling that this is not something that should exist, like I just saw something I shouldn't have, but it is clearly appearing right in front of my eyes. I started to feel cold. The more I looked, the more scared I became. My mother noticed and wanted to see what I just took. I told her there was someone behind the door. She yelled at me and called me nonsense. But I know my eyes don't deceive me, and of course, her reaction confirmed everything. Her face darkened, she immediately sobered up and told me to remember to close and lock the door, turn off the lights, and tell me to go to my bedroom. She also immediately entered her room and closed the door. The next day, I checked the camera again, and I couldn't find the picture. Maybe she deleted it? Since then, she and I have not talked about this anymore. It's been in the back of my mind for so many years. I really want to tell somebody. It's probably crazy enough not to believe me, but I know I haven't lost my mind. I know what I've seen, and even my imagination is not an element here because she sees it too. My family doesn't worship anything, and I'm not superstitious, nor do I believe in ghosts, but it was an event that 8 years later I still can't forget. This one is by u/Ice Teed. Ice Teed. Ghost at an abandoned train station. I figured I would share my ghost story that took place some 5 years ago because why not? So this happened in ninth grade, and after school, me and my friends would usually take the tram to get home. On this particular day, it was only me and one of my good friends. Usually, we'd get off in the city center to connect with another bus, but on this day, for some reason, we chose to take it to the end stop. We were tired and sleepy from school, I guess, and so we did. But this had now added an hour or so from our already long day. So we were rather keen on getting back home, though me and my small bladder needed to use the toilet pretty urgently. Luckily, my friend knew that there was an old metro train station just beneath where we had gotten off. The station had a medium-sized, red building that served as a waiting area, I suppose. It was cloudy outside, and inside this building house the lights were off. Not a single soul to be seen. Some ironic foreshadowing. The lighting inside the toilet was fluorescent as well. All this just really set an eerie ambience. I go do my business, but in the midst of that, I hear my friend just completely break down. She screams at me to hurry and come out. I laughed it off, thinking she was being dramatic or pranking me, which wouldn't be crazy or implausible in my defense. But I do eventually come back out, and she hits me with, "I just saw a ghost." I just stood there thinking, what has gotten into this girl? She's the Lulu. But she stood her ground and guided me to a mirror that was attached to a door and told me to just stand there and wait. Not even 3 seconds later, this ghost, who was clearly an elderly man who was in a train driver uniform as well, very on brand for the location, comes obliquely from behind and just floated forward straight through the door. It all happened very quickly, and so at that point, I'm just screaming my lungs out and we sprint for the exit. It was a very intense and very interesting set of events, to leave it at that. I've never been opposed to ghosts existing, on the contrary, actually. But I've also found it hard to believe that they present themselves so similar to real humans. Now I know at least. This one is by you /charmed without an A and two. Charmed two. Doppelgangers. I've seen 4 doppelgangers or some type of mimic in my life. Once, when about 13, there was a lot of weird things going on around the house. Being into ghost shows back then, I took a picture of the room, and in the corner there was 2 faces. One that looked like my step-uncle and another of me. Both had a reddish glow in their eyes and a sinister half smile. The other 2 times I was living with a friend and his family. When I was about 18 or 19, there was this table facing the sliding glass door. We'd hang out there. After a while, I started seeing what looked like a shadow version of both his sisters. Then they'd talk or walk by sometimes, and it was only them it would happen to. I tried telling my friend and his mom, but they didn't believe me until one day it happened when all 3 of us were talking, and they seen it for themselves. Can go more into detail into the other occurrences before and after seeing the spirits if anyone is interested. If anyone else that has experiences with doppelgangers, I'd really like to hear them. Never really see posts about them. Also, would like more information on those kind of manifestations, if you can. Thanks. This one is by you /TierXD. How I Started to Believe, and this is a haunting. In September of 2009, I started to believe in ghosts. Now my whole family life, now my whole life I would see or hear random things, but I was also a child and had an overactive imagination. But I had a weird experience with toothpaste. Now I had the caned toothpaste, and so young, me put the toothpaste on my toothbrush, but it went back into the medicine cabinet and started to brush my teeth. Now I was not close to the cabinet, and I was like, it would be funny if a ghost threw this. Well, I did not believe in ghosts. I did watch a lot of ghost hunting shows growing up, and as I saw that my toothpaste was thrown off the cabinet and to the right-hand wall. After this, I heard a wrong laugh like, he. That was slow. I still live in this house that I now know holds 3 to 4 ghosts and a demon. I now believe in the paranormal, but I am not. So I'm trying to find my haunted house 1 because this one is called My Haunted House 3, but there's only one other in front of it. So let's see what it says. This one is by you /butthole chocolate 56. My Haunted House. To begin, I must tell you about my house. It is a brick farmhouse built in the 1860s with a fairly decent plot of land with it. I did not move here at a young age. I lived in this house my whole life, and I have seen many things that have made me know that there are ghosts and more in this life. Behind my house used to be a cemetery, but they decided to move the bodies, and rumor has it there are still a few out there that have not been uncovered. This is a rather short story, but I feel it is the best one to begin my little series with, and now I shall begin. It was a summer day. I had just gotten home from school, and the bus ride felt long, almost too long. I had gotten off the bus, and my dad waited after work to pick us up from the bus. My brother and sister sat up front with my dad, and with no other option, I sat in the bed of the truck. I was just off in my drowsiness as we were getting closer to the house. When we were close to the area where my parents park, I noticed what looked to be the end of a white sheet blow into the machine shed. Once I parked, I began to walk down to the barn, thinking it was a sheet that had blown off the clothesline due to the wind, so I was going to retrieve it for my mom. Now that I'm older and I think about it, there was not enough wind to pick up a sheet up that high in the air. As I walked down closer, there was no white sheet. It was not in the barn. It was nowhere to be found. I don't know what it was. After that happened, I didn't say anything for fear of my parents thinking I was just making things up, but I know what I saw, and if anyone has an idea as to what it could be, I would love to hear it. When I was 14 to 15, it was a late night, and I can remember laying in bed. As I was falling fast asleep, I remember hearing a sound that woke me back up. As I laid in my bed, I could hear skipping and singing from downstairs. I thought it was my sister, but the skipping and singing kept going, and I heard whatever it was stop in the kitchen doorway and say, "Hello, kitty," in a happy little childlike way. After I heard that, I got up and went downstairs to get my sister to stop, but when I got down there, she wasn't skipping. She was just sitting on the couch eating ice cream. I asked her about it, and she said she wasn't, but I didn't believe her, so I went to the kitchen where my parents were watching TV, so I asked them, and even they said she wasn't. I remember getting so angry because I felt like everyone was lying to me about something so simple, but they weren't lying. I wouldn't know if they were, or I would know if they were. The morning after that whole situation, my mom asked me about it, so I explained everything. Then she even told me about a lot of her experiences and why, when we were done playing with toys that had batteries, we had to take the batteries out or else they would go off at random points through the day and night. She even told me about how when I was a child, she would hear voices through the baby monitor. Well, that's all. I hope you all enjoyed it. And this one is by you /Olivia858. Abandoned School Ghosts Experience. This story happened in my hometown when I think I was about 8 or 9 years old. My hometown is very small, though there are multiple neighborhoods and the occasional abandoned house left to rot. At that time, I didn't know much about the town history, but I knew of an old building that was called the Old School. The old name of the town school. By my classmates and teachers. Anyway, one day I was walking to school, and since the abandoned building is on my way, I took a glance at it. In one of the windows of the house, I saw a pure white curtain flapping around because of the wind. Behind the curtain were three elderly women. They seemed to be having a conversation before looking down from the window at me, making eye contact. I still have a memory of the look on one of the women's faces, a face of confusion. I quickly broke eye contact and continued walking to school. I don't remember what happened that day except for that strange experience. I don't know what I saw that day, if it really happened, and if I was supposed to see it. For all I know, it could be a dream. The only people I ever told about this experience were my mum and my friend. My mum said that I saw ghosts, like a past student of the school, but other than that, she laughed it off. My friend, on the other hand, was creeped out by the story, also telling me that I probably saw ghosts. For extra information, there's no reason for people to be entering the building, and there is no accessible entrance that I know of. The area around the building is all covered in weeds, vines, and bushes. All windows and doors are boarded up with wood, and nobody investigates the building's area. I'm not sure if I really did see ghosts or if it was a dream. I might try to get a picture of the building when I can to support my story. Thanks for reading. Yeah, there's a few of them in Spanish, and I can't read Spanish. Sorry. This one is by you /moonchildren. Appearance of man with black hat, sunglasses, briefcase, and long coat. Hello, Ghost Stories community. Been interested in and reading many of your shared stories and experiences, but now have one that I'd like some help understanding. My partner, who is known to be logical and rational, calmly let me know that there was a man who visited our bedroom twice. One occasion during the early hours of the morning, and another in the late afternoon of the same day. This man appeared for only a second at the foot of our bed, or for both occasions, before disappearing without a trace. My partner described the man to be dressed in a short black hat with a brim, had black sunglasses that covered his eyes, wore a black trench coat that extended past his knees, and was holding a briefcase in one hand. This man appeared at the foot of our bed and faced my partner twice, but did and said nothing before vanishing again. My partner and I have not experienced anything like this before, and while we're not alarmed, wonder what this man's intentions are. Has anyone seen a character similar to this description, and how did they handle it? Thank you. This one is by you / dropped something. Marzipan Dazzling 8985. My first paranormal experience. To start, this is a true story. My family and I moved from SoCal to Mexico in 2007, and we were accompanied by two of my parents' friends along the way. My parents built a 3-story house there, so we all had a room. Parents, their friends from Cali, and an aunt who stayed in another room. Despite all those people in the house, I felt something was off. They told me that I was just adjusting and they still hadn't called the priest to bless the house, and that when he came, all would feel better. Anyway, bedtime came, and my brother and I decided to sleep in my parents' bedroom the first night. I know we were old, but every other room was taken or filled with boxes. So, since it's a big master bedroom, we placed our sleeping bags on the floor and called it a day. Sadly, I'm always the last one to go to sleep, so there I am, waiting to fall asleep when I start feeling the room go cold. I thought nothing of it, but then I started feeling very scared for no reason. I did what we all do at that age and wrapped myself in a blanket. I thought it was all in my head, but then I heard a dog breathe close to my ear, and I knew that my brother was around the other side, so it wasn't him. I was really scared now, but I also feared for my family. I am the oldest. Since they were all asleep, in an act of desperation and fear, I got up, only to find nothing was there. I woke my dad up and told him what happened. He just thought I was exaggerating and told me to pray and sleep. This time I slept a little closer to them, and right when I was about to go to sleep, a solid steel door we have at our entrance slammed so hard everyone jumped and woke up. This had never happened before, and 12 years later never happened again. There was no wind at all, and nobody could explain how it opened without the key. They all started talking, and then they looked at me and told me to go to sleep, so I left. I woke up the next morning, and as I was making my cereal bowl, my mom asked me what was it I saw or heard. I told her, and she just went pale. She said my aunt and our two guests saw a woman in white walk down the stairs. Moments later, the door slammed shut. We looked, and 7 people can't be wrong. This was one of the many things that happened in our house, including 4 years of sleep paralysis nightly. This one is by you/bean_bobbler. My first ghost experience, it was extremely detailed and vivid. Advice. I've been a skeptic, but always open-minded to the unexplainable. My parents believe in ghosts and have told me the stories when I was in my mid-teens about the first house we lived in when I was a baby, as well as the interactions I would have with ghosts as a baby. Now here is what happened at 4:30 a.m. a few days ago. I stayed around my boyfriend's house for the night. I've never felt uncomfortable at night, but sometimes I feel like I'm being watched, but don't think much of it. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. randomly, feeling odd like I was being watched. I turn to roll over, and as I get onto my back, I look up, and there's this old man floating above the far corner of the bed. He had messy, medium-length hair, but balding, missing teeth, blue and white striped pajamas, a leather brown book, and gray socks. He also had this faint, most like blue-gray glow around him. He was extremely detailed, like he was in the light despite the room being pitch black. I let out a surprised, "Oh!" because I jumped at the sight. He turned to face me, recognized that I could see him, almost shrugged. Then, as I'm shaking my boyfriend to wake up, he turns and disappears through the ceiling. Last thing I see is his feet going through the ceiling. I looked online, but it's definitely not sleep paralysis, as I was moving, speaking, and blinking. Even after turning to face my boyfriend and turning back, he was still in the same position. I didn't feel threatened or afraid, just a bit shocked as anyone would be. If anyone could help me or give me advice, as I'm just confused but very curious, I have posted this on other ghost subreddits in hope for someone with more experience than I could help. This one is by you/pussy mode. Is he real? So basically, I'm a 14-year-old female, and my friend is also a 14-year-old female, and it was break. Also, this is my first post, since I never was interested in writing things like these, but today was shocking, so bear with me. Me at 14 and my best friend at 14 usually do what girls our age do, laugh together about stuff, walk together, etc. But today it was kind of different. We were sitting down on some benches outside because I suggested we should, since there's a very strong AC inside the building we learn in. We walked outside and sat on the wooden benches. We were talking and laughing like usual, and we then started reading a story on Tumblr. You know what I mean. While also watching this French dude's video, since my best friend is French. We then got more into the video, and I noticed something in the corner of my eye. There was a kid who looks kind of younger than us, probably 12 or 13, pointing a paper plane at my best friend's head. Out of reflex, for some unknown reason, I snatched it out of his hand and threw it at the ground, and I'm still very much confused, even if I'm in PE class now, but that's besides the point. Like I said, I threw it at the ground, and we were both shocked and nervous. We started laughing due to the nerves that a literal kid was pointing a paper plane at my best friend's head while we were doing our thing. I got up laughing because I was also amused at the fact that I popped out a random reflex that wasn't necessary at all while she was still laughing on the bench. I glanced behind me at the kid, and then I realized something. He was caressing his fingers like he was confused about the fact I snatched the paper plane from his hand, and had a stoic face. I then turned around, continuing to laugh with my friend, until I turned back around to the benches to see that he was gone. I know this might sound stupid, and he might have just ran away too fast than normal, and that I'm paranoid about the fact that there might be ghosts in the school, since usually in my room, stuff will fall and I don't feel very much alone in my room. Not in a way that is cringy and weird, but more in a way that I've experienced these things falling in my room at least 10 times, and that I'm sometimes kind of scared to sleep in my room. But it's still confusing. Now he was stoic and looked confused, then vanished without even seeing him run to a certain direction. I don't have any disorders such as schizophrenia that I know of, but the whole situation was weird and confusing. So I hope I can get any comments maybe explaining this phenomenon. This one is by u/Shisabhati. Am I protected or not? Experience. To give some backstory to this story, I am aged 15, and I had some traumatic things happen in my short life so far, but it's paranormal experiences that are worse for me. Sometime late 2006 to 2007 in January, and a bit after that, my mom was dating a guy named LJ. That was his nickname. Didn't really care to learn his name, so I don't know. While dating this guy, my mom was already pregnant with me to my actual father. They were both really toxic to my mom, domestic violence and all, and that's why my mom got away from my father. When I was just about to be conceived, LJ was adamant that I was his son, so when I was conceived, he put his name on my birth certificate without my mom knowing. It's changed now to my actual father. Eventually, my mom had enough of the violence and she left. I don't know how long after, but LJ suffered a fatal overdose from heroin. Years go by. I was 12 at this time. Now, it was a Friday night, and because it was a Friday night, I stayed up late playing my game. Now, to put this into perspective, my chair was facing away from my door. As I was playing, I had the sudden urge of someone was watching me, but young me, terrified, I tried not to look back and tried to forget about it. Minutes go by and the feeling came back, and I don't know to really describe it, but it felt like a much darker presence and my heart was pounding, but I tried to forget about it again, but until what I thought were to be a man's voice saying, "My sweet boy." Now I was too young to remember his voice, but that sent shivers down my spine because I know I recognized the voice. Just don't know where I turned my head finally and saw my door was wide open, but no one was there. Just as I was about to calm down, I heard my mom faintly from her room say, "What are you doing here?" And after that, it sounded like there was things being moved in my mom's room. I went to check up on her, but she was dead asleep, and at this point, I felt like me and my mom weren't the only people in her room. I eventually woke her up because I didn't know what the fuck was going on. She woke up, I told her about it, and she got up and I noticed scratch marks on her legs and marks around her throat that looked like she had been strangled. I brought it up to her and she had that look in her eyes like this has happened before. And I asked her what was it, and the only thing she said was this was LJ, and my heart dropped. Still to this day, I get shivers thinking about it, but I also feel protected. I don't like the guy, never have, never will. Doesn't matter if I felt protected because I felt the presence so sinister and dark and can't really get my head around it to this day. Ghost who likes to follow me while I work. This is by u/away-significance622. So recently I've realized I'm a medium / can see spirits. I usually see them in an aura type state / mist, but this time was different. He was in the corner of my eye and kept saying Devon. He had brown hair, a yellow shirt, and glasses. I'm not sure who it was because no one I know that has passed looks like that. I've also recently heard a lady ghostwise say, "Excuse me," while I was folding clothes. This one is by u/away-significance622. Ran into a ghost. So, I was driving along the highway back home from work around 10 p.m. I kept seeing something shadowy in my passenger seat, but I couldn't look over, so I chose to ignore it until I got home. 2 seconds later, while I'm driving, I see this white, transparent figure just go through my car and myself. Like a hologram, I was freaking out and had goosebumps the entire ride home after that. I'm not sure what it was, but I'm still spooked. So these are all pretty short. This one is asking for help. It's by user/ArcticWolf2008. Me and my parents were getting ready to go on a trip. I go to my room to get my bag. No one but me was in my room, so I thought, I turn around and there was a ghostly figure standing in my room. Ooh. This one is by you, MJ. Goes MJAAYYY. It wanted me alone in the garage. A lot of things went down in this house, but out of all the spooky things that have happened to me there, this one just crossed my mind after 18 years. I was 14 years old, living in Orange County with my 2 sisters and my mother. We had a rough upbringing, so renting an actual house was like a dream come true for us at that time, until we realized we were living in a haunted house. I was with my mom the day we rented. The garage was scary as hell, even the daylight with people around. just always gave me a clustered feeling of something being there I couldn't see. When the garage door was shut, it was pitch black. No light at all from outside could get through the garage door. During the summer, I would wake up early. I would listen to my CDs on the radio, so every time I came in or out, I made sure my bedroom door was shut because my mom liked to sleep in the living room on the couch right outside my bedroom. I would clean my room, the kitchen, and the bathroom before I would ask my mom if I could meet my best friend at our halfway mark. This particular morning, the funky, spooky things of the house started early. As I walked out of my bedroom, shut my door, walked down the hall passing 2 bedrooms to the restroom, I noticed something from the corner of my eye in the kitchen, like a silhouette of a person, that vanished. This was normal. My mom's bedroom was directly outside of the bathroom door to the right, and it had a private bathroom which led to the garage. Well, as I was walking out of the restroom, I seen a person walking into my mom's bedroom, like a woman, which I assumed was my mother since we were the only ones home. Thinking it was my mom, I was talking to her about leaving my friends, and the bedroom door shut on my face, and I was thinking, wow, she's rude today. So I opened the door and again asked if I could go to my friends when her bathroom door started shutting. When I opened the door and said, Mom, I realized the garage door was wide open. The garage door was heavy and did not stay open on its own, ever. And it was pitch black. So in that torment, I knew it wasn't my mom, so I ran out, shut her bedroom door behind me, started toward my bedroom when I noticed my bedroom door was wide open. I was standing in my room confused and realized my radio was off. I tried turning it multiple times and seeing it was actually unplugged. I went to the living room to wake my mom up and ask her if she went into my room to unplug my radio. She said she didn't even go into my room or touch my radio that morning because she was sleeping still. I don't even know why I had to ask if she went into the garage through her bedroom for clarification, but needless to say, it wasn't her either. She asked me to please not leave her there alone, but I did, and I feel bad still. Anyways, that night, I didn't want to come back home. I know whatever it was this time, it wanted me in the garage alone. This one is by you/Senior Burns. The Mimic. So basically, the last house we lived in was pretty creepy, to say the least. Quite a few unexplained things happened there, but there was one experience that really stood out to me and will always be imprinted in my brain. My mother had gone out, so it was only me, my brother, and my sister in the house. Well, so we thought. My sister was around 4 or 5 at the time. She could be pretty forgetful and forget my mother had gone out, so casually shouted, "Ma'am," as in a question sort of tone. I swear to God, I heard clear as day this perfect "yes" response in my mother's voice. I was pretty confused and thought maybe she got back early, but looked out the window and her car was still gone. I ran downstairs and asked my brother if he heard that. He said he also heard it. My sister was pretty confused. She heard it as well. She was about to go looking for our mother after she heard the voice, thinking it was her. I'm just glad she didn't. Whatever that was it potentially trying to lure her somewhere? I thought I was hearing things, but after my brother and sister heard it too, I was certain that it was some sort of entity cloning our mother's voice. She got back like 20 minutes later, and we told her about it. She was as confused as we were. To this day, I still question what that was. Haunted House. This is by U/Plastic Sudden 4151. Hi guys. I was curious about some events of my life, but I've always wondered what to do with this story, so here goes. I was raised in a pleasant house, but me and two other family members always felt odd. For some reason, all of these paranormal things only happened to my mother, brother, and me. We come from a psychic sort of bloodline, so I always figured that was why. One time, my brother woke up in the night and placed a 60 to 80-pound TV on my mother's legs and watched the static, asleep and only 8 years old. Then the psychic things began to happen. My brother predicted a death, and I've also predicted and known exactly when a family member passed. My brother screamed bloody murder once, and we walked in and he said it was a boy with red eyes. He saw this boy many times, but I never did, and he doesn't remember any of it now that he's an adult. All of this toned down once we moved out and got older, but I'm curious if anyone has any explanation. This one is by U/FurMama 2004. My neighbor's house. I previously posted some things that went on in my house growing up. This story I am about to tell is the first spooky experience I remember as a child. I don't remember how old I was, probably no older than 12. My young sister and I were friends with our neighbor's granddaughter, who was often at her grandparents' house while her mother worked. We take turns going to each other's houses. The girl we played with, I'll call her Jay, had pretty much free reign over the house while her grandma, who was a nurse, slept during the day. We weren't allowed upstairs, though. This house was like my parents'. Jay's grandparents were the first owners. They were very good Christian people. Jay had a rough childhood and was a pathological liar. We had a lot of drama between the three of us. One day, while Grandma was sleeping, we decided to sneak upstairs. There were at least 3 bedrooms, beautifully decorated with antique furniture and decor. We decided to each pick a room and pretend it was ours and play house. We even had some baby dolls to play with. After a while, I began to feel uncomfortable and like I was being watched. I met back up with Jay and my sister and told them that I didn't feel right up there. My sister felt the same way. Jay told us that when she was younger, they heard voices from upstairs. It was hard to know when she was telling the truth, though. Regardless of whether she was lying, all 3 of us freaked out upstairs. We decided to go downstairs and never play upstairs again. Every now and then, I'd look up at the stairs in the upstairs windows from my house and get this awful feeling of dread. Well, that was a good night, don't you think? Yeah, I'm pretty laid back and relaxed as I stayed up till the sun came up, then I went to bed. Then I tried to sleep all day, but it didn't quite work out. There's a lot of noise around the house so far as that goes, but I just want to thank you guys again for joining me tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It's been such a pleasure having your listening ears just listening away to Frankenstein, whatever you'd like to call it, as well as Reddit ghost stories. There were some good ones in there. There was some short but sweet ones, but on that account, thank you so much once more for being my friends and just being here with me. And thank you to all of our friends on We Are Paradox Media's KPNL Radio, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you may be listening beyond the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend. We have Psychic Chris Garcia in the house, and then we're going to finish Frankenstein on Sunday, start with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and read some more Reddit ghost stories. You guys, don't forget, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better, and together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. I don't think I'll be doing an after party tonight. I'm probably gonna hit the hay pretty early, but if you guys would like to look us up for future reference, you can look me up under live Tessa.N.Thomas30, or write down this number if you'd ever like to call in or join us by phone at 970-335-9596. Until next time, nighty night, love and light. I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and week, and I will see you back here, same time, same place. Take care of my yous.